So we can get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anya Autry. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions here at Drexel University Kline School of Law. I am joined today here by my colleagues, Ina Halili and Jacqueline Marsh, as well as our student panel who will introduce themselves in just a moment. If Ina and Jacqueline, you want to kick us off with introducing yourselves.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Marsh. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here at Drexel Kline Law. Welcome. We're excited to share information with you today about our two-year accelerated program and looking forward to connecting with many of you as applicants in the coming weeks and months.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ina Halili. I'm the Assistant Dean of Enrollment Management here at the Kline School of Law. Thank you for being here today. I'm also looking forward to helping answer some questions about this really unique offering that we offer with the two-year program.
Um, Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We are, like Ina said, here today to discuss one of our programs that is very unique to Kline Law, which is our two-year accelerated JD program. And so we designed today's session to provide you all with a comprehensive understanding of how the program works and just highlighting its distinctive features and its potential alignment with your goals. So the primary focus will be the two-year accelerated program. However, some of the information we will share today will be relevant to those who are interested in our three-year summer start program. And a recording for both last week's, we recorded a webinar session on that particular program last week. So that recording and today's webinar will also be shared with you all this week if you are looking for more information on that. And also just a quick note about how we'll be handling questions today. We'll be using the Q&A box exclusively for all questions. So please, refrain from submitting any questions in the chat as we won't be monitoring that as closely during the live session and just given the high volume of attendees. We also may not be able to get to every question. So if we don't get to yours, you are very welcome to follow up with us directly through email, which we'll share at the end of today's session. So please make sure you're using the Q&A box only for any questions you'd like our panel or admissions team to answer. All right, so before we dive in, let's get to our presentation. So before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. We're currently in our priority decision timeline, which is November 15th. So submitting your application by this date means that you'll be among the first to be reviewed for admission. You'll be among the first to be considered for scholarship awards, and you'll also receive a guaranteed decision by January 15th, which please note it is non-binding. And also, if you are taking your November LSAT, your score can arrive later in the month. Just make sure all of your materials are submitted by November 15th. Similarly, with the two-year accelerated program and the three-year summer start program, the application deadline is January 15th. And after then will be a rolling admission. So same likewise with the priority decision deadline. If you want to be considered for that deadline, you can still submit your materials. If you have an LSAT score coming in later in the month or the next month, you can still submit your materials and just make sure to let us know that we'll expect your LSAT score to come in. All right. And then so moving on to the actual benefits of the two-year accelerated program is designed for highly motivated students that's ready to immerse themselves in an intensive legal education and enter the professional field sooner. So students really benefit from the same rigorous curriculum and experiential opportunities as the traditional JD students, just on a condensed timeline that will maximize efficiency and opportunity. So it's basically the same JD, just a less amount of time. And you'll complete the same number of credits, courses, and experiential learning opportunities as a traditional three-year JD, but in just 2 years. So you'll begin in May and graduate 2 years later, putting you on the fastest track to practicing law. And so what that entails is full access to experiential learning, Our accelerated students participate in the same experiential learning opportunities as the three-year counterparts, including co-ops, clinics, and pro bono service. So the program is structured so that the practical learning element remains a core part of the curriculum. And then financial aid implications. You may want to consider starting law school now or early under the current federal aid rules just before the upcoming changes take effect on July 1st of 2026. And we just ask that you please contact our law school financial aid manager, Mary D. Rivera, for any questions regarding this, and we'll provide her contact information at the end of today's session as well. And then moving on, faster entry into the legal profession. You'll also graduate and begin your career a full year earlier than your traditional, than in the traditional program, which means basically you'll enter the job market faster and gain that real world experience much sooner. And then a tight-knit cohort and a broader network. So the two-year accelerated JD cohort begins as a close and supportive learning community that actually it extends throughout your time here at Kline. And at the same time, you'll take many of your courses alongside the JD students, the traditional JD students, giving you that wider peer network as well. And then lastly, structured success. The curriculum is thoughtfully organized to balance rigor with support, and students will collaborate closely with faculty and academic advisors who are experienced with the accelerated format and will be able to help you succeed in that kind of dynamic environment. So those are all of the highlights of the two-year program. Again, if you have questions, please direct them in the chat. Excuse me, in the Q&A box. All right, so we'll stop now. So now that we've covered some of the background on the two-year accelerated program, we'd like to shift to today's part of the session that I think you all will find most valuable, which is hearing directly from our students. Our student panelists are currently Drexel Kline Law students who are participating in the two-year accelerated program, and they've experienced these pathways firsthand and can offer insight into what life is like as a Kline student. So from managing the coursework to building community and preparing for experiential learning opportunities. So we'll start off with some introductions. I'll ask each of our panelists to just introduce themselves with your name, your hometown, and your undergraduate school and major, and what your current area of interest is. So Senta, if you want to start us off by introducing yourselves.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Senta. I'm in my second and final year of the AJD program and loving it. My hometown is New Hope, Pennsylvania. I also currently serve as our Student Bar Association president, which is like our student body or student government president. And my interest for postgraduate is civil litigation.
Thank you.
Awesome. And hi, I'm Andrew L. Cuesta. I am originally from North Canaan, Connecticut, which is a really small town, but I lived in Boston for about 10 years before moving to Philly for law school. My undergraduate school was at the University of Connecticut. I studied English and political science. Like Senta, I'm a second year AJD student, so we started at the same time, and we are together in that close-knit community that you heard about. And my interests at the moment are in labor and employment law.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Senta and Andrew. It's great to have you here with us. And so right now I'll start off with just a few questions, and then we'll open up the floor for your questions in the audience towards the end of the session. And again, please feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the session, and we'll answer in the background or live once we're finished answering our panel questions. Thank you. All right, so first question I'll pose to both of you. What initially drew you to Kline Law, and why did you decide the two-year accelerated JD track was the right fit for you?
I can start us off. I didn't mention in my intro, I did graduate from Drexel University for my undergrad. I was in the global studies pre-law program. And that was a big role in my decision to commit to the AJD program because for those who may be in the undergrad program right now, Drexel University operates in 10-week semesters, or it did when I was there. And so the pace of the AJD program felt really familiar to me, to my AJ or to my undergrad experience. But also, as discussed, I found that the cohort really matched my work ethic, my faster pacing, and I also was fortunately able to get some work experience while I was in college at law firms, and I really enjoyed my time there, and I was just really eager to get my degree and return to the workforce. So those were the things that I considered when I applied.
Yeah, I think some similar themes for me. I did not go straight through from undergrad though. Senta, if I remember correctly, Senta actually started law school before officially graduating from her undergrad. So Senta's really a go-getter. I spent about, I don't know, 15 years out of school after my undergrad degree. Well, actually, a lot of that was in a different graduate program, but I was pretty eager to. So basically, I was doing a career shift. I was working in academia before coming to law school. And so I was pretty eager to do that transition as quickly as possible. I figured I'm not getting any younger. And so I was kind of eager to get back into the workforce, start earning that paycheck again as soon as I could.
All right, thank you so much for your answers. And so I'm actually curious to know in your process in deciding, how you wanted to go about your degree, did you at all consider the traditional 3-year program? And if so, what ultimately convinced you to take the accelerated path?
Yeah.
I did consider oh, sorry, Andrew. I did consider the traditional 3-year program, um, but rather briefly. I connected a lot with alumni and faculty at Klein, and just to hear um, the idea of the AGD program a little bit more, get a hands-on, maybe more day-to-day impression of the program. And what I had learned is that there's some misconceptions that because the program is pretty unique, that maybe it's not as successful in the workforce, or maybe that it's, a little too much on your plate. But based on the impressions from both faculty and alumni, those are pretty quickly squashed, and that it seemed a lot more manageable. Students were very successful in the program, and you do check off the same requirements as you would in a traditional program. And so all of it kind of pointed to it just made sense for me to continue down the 2-year.
Yeah, again, a lot of what Senta said holds true for me as well. I did consider 3-year programs, and I applied to a few as well. But then, in just kind of like assessing, the my own personal timeline and objectives that I had, things that I wanted to get done. I think the 2-year aligned more closely with some of those personal interests of uh, like I mentioned before, I was in graduate school before this for a master's degree and actually a PhD. So I had spent a long time in school already. I felt that I had the kind of like I don't know, academic chops and study skills. I didn't have to spend a lot of time thinking about how I was going to go about studying and analyzing reading and writing. I had been doing that for quite some time. So I could totally understand why some folks would prefer 3 years, draw things out a little bit more. But for me, I felt pretty comfortable just kind of like jumping in right from the start. And it just, I don't know that it would work for everybody, but it worked well for me and a lot of my friends here.
Awesome. Those were really great answers. Thank you so much for sharing. And then some, I'm sure everyone is wondering also, how did you prepare yourself mentally or academically for such an intensive program before starting?
Let's see, I prepare myself mentally. My partner is actually also a lawyer. So he both knew what I would be going through and had some good pointers along the way. his main thing was like, you're going to be working a lot in law school, so let's take the time beforehand to enjoy it. I actually moved to Philadelphia just a few days before starting school, so I was kind of focused on that and the move, finding a place to live and all that goes with that. And it was actually kind of a nice distraction from, getting like too nervous about starting another academic program. So yeah, and like I said, I had been in school. I had been an instructor at a university and a college in Massachusetts. And so I felt pretty comfortable with kind of like the academic side of things. So I think it was more just kind of like mental preparation. And the main preparation was just kind of taking a bit of time to myself before things really got started.
I agree with everything that was said. For me personally, I am first generation and I don't have lawyers in my family or friends really. And so I made it a point to talk to as many people as I possibly could. So that included going to prospective student events, admitted student events, like I said, alumni and faculty, just to find some familiar faces and kind of get a lay of the land before school started. That was really important. I did also take a trip beforehand. So, kind of echoing what Andrew said, preparing yourself mentally for the rigorous years ahead. It's really necessary to balance yourself on a emotional level, mental level. That also included stocking up on self-care things so that I could remind myself to take breaks when things got hard and have enough of a stash of face masks when I do. So.
Thank you. And yes, it's a transition. So that is very, very important. Thank you for answering that. Um, and then moving on, how have your professors and advisors really supported you in balancing this accelerated timeline? And what kind of support systems have been most helpful to you?
I think the professors and faculty have been some of the most like welcoming group of people, especially in comparison to other faculty that I've met at other schools, not to throw shade. But they have been really admirable and understanding of the program. So while they don't necessarily like treat us differently, they are mindful of our workload and will be, um, just really respectful of that. In particular, we have a Dean of Community and Culture. Her name is Dean Boardley. She has probably been my emotional rock and kind of on-campus therapist through my years here, and I would really recommend connecting with her as well. Um, but generally, as the school has been very approachable and respectful of our program and very supportive. I also make it a point to hang out with people that are not law school friends. So whether that's my partner who's been very supportive or friends who have an understanding that my time is a little bit more limited these days, that support system is very grounding and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, again, echoing a lot of the same things. I will say the AJD program is smaller than the traditional 3-year program. So the professors, aren't they're not quite as used to us as they are to the 3 years. They just interact with a lot more 3-year students. So sometimes, you'll walk into a class and some of the professors will be like, and we have a couple AJDs with us, and like, God bless them. They're go-getters, and they sit in the front row a lot of the time. But they are all super supportive. You can go to their office hours. You can set up meeting if their schedule doesn't work for you. You can always set up a meeting outside of their office hours. I think the AJDs got a lot of admiration from the professors. One thing that maybe this is getting like a little bit in the weeds, but as a summer start, the AJDs are taking like 4 classes, and then there's the summer starts that are taking 2 at the same time. And one of the professors over the summer, at least when I started, was Dean Oates. He's the dean of students. And we were talking to him. We were learning about like the grading process, like the curve and all that. And the AJDs were kind of concerned that like, oh, the other students are only taking 2 classes and we're taking 4 and like, da, da, da. And he was like, if you're an AJD, don't worry about it. Because in my experience, the AJDs are, they have their ducks in a row. They know what they're doing. They've thought about this program and decided that it's for them. And we all did, just fine. We definitely hold our own. So the professors are supportive and aware of what the 2-year program is like.
That is really, really important, and it echoes the kind of supportive environment that we have here at Klein. So thank you for sharing that. And then we talked a lot about experiential learning opportunities. How would you say the accelerated structure has impacted your ability to participate in those opportunities?
Yeah, I do think that with the 2 years, I think you have to spend a little bit more time making careful choices. You have the same or virtually the same number of opportunities. For example, I'm going to be doing a second co-op next semester, and there's one required experiential graduation requirement. So I did that with my first co-op over the summer, and that's what most AJD students do, co-op their sort of middle summer. But I was actually I'm going to be able to do a second one next semester with the way I set up my schedule and my credits. That being said, there's a million things that I would love to do, and I couldn't even do everything I would want to do in a 3-year program or a 4-year program. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. Like all the clinics are super interesting. The Marshall Brennan program was something that I really was interested in when I started. And I'm not able to fit in everything that I wanted to do. So I did have to make some choices there. But again, I don't think that even in a 3-year program, I would be able to do everything that I wanted to do. So I think it is just like a little more strategizing. Talk to, your advisor, talk to the lawyers that you meet at networking events and get their advice. Talk to career services office, who are always willing to have a conversation. And then we have a really awesome coordinator of the co-op program who will walk you through the process, and she'll provide advice about like maybe you want to work at this kind of firm or this kind of nonprofit or this government agency, and how those sort of align with your goals. So there's no shortage of opportunities, and AJDs can do all of it, but you might not be able to, you have access to all of it, but you might not be able to do all of it. So just think carefully about those decisions and what you really want.
Along the same lines, absolutely. There's no limit to your experiential learning as an AJD as opposed to a traditional student. You're exposed to the same exact opportunities. I also took a summer co-op for my experiential learning, and it was a wonderful experience. A lot of traditional students choose to take a co-op over their summers too. So I found it to be completely identical. But I do agree to really stress being proactive in your experiential learning opportunities, because we do have really great resources that you need to seek out in order to maximize the 2 years here as opposed to the 3. I'll also add the caveat, being first generation, I didn't know this, but big law, this like gray cloud of big law, gets, this reputation that it doesn't cater towards the 2-year program. And in some respects, that is true because you're meant to stay there for their summer, and then that's how you get hired post-grad. But that is not always the case anymore because the program is widely spread through the city now. And I have found that I haven't really been limited in my exposure to big law, if that's something that you're interested in. We did have someone in our cohort spend their summer at a big law firm. And I just wanted to throw that caveat in.
Thank you. Those were very, very thoughtful answers. Appreciate it. And so I know you guys had actually touched on our kind of sense of community in your answers a few times. And so I just want to dive into that a little bit more. Can you describe what your cohort experience was like, and how you felt that sense of community amongst your peers.
I love our cohorts. There's about 13 of us, and that's kind of consistent with other AJD programs. It'll be like less than 20 students or so every year, as opposed to the traditional program that might be closer to like, I don't even know, like 100. I don't know. Um, but in doing so, the bond is really, really strong. And something I really admire about our cohort is that it's really diverse, not only in identity, but in background and in age and just like personalities. So we couldn't be more different, but we have this shared work ethic and this shared almost trauma bond from our first summer together that I find is really, really strong as we no longer have all of our classes together, but when we see each other, it's like, oh, I know who I'm sitting with. I know who my study partner is. I know someone who will always, send me some notes if I need it. I find that I can really, really trust these people. And yeah, I really, really love it.
Yeah, the group chat is hot. We're all in a text chain together, and we that's kind of our main way of keeping in touch. But yeah, we all start in the same classes, so and we're where the summer starts for a couple classes. It's a really nice way to start, I think. So in when Senta and I started, we had two classes that were very small. What was it? Civil procedure and criminal law. It was just like the 14 students. And then we had slightly larger classes, including the summer starts for contracts and legal methods, which is like a writing class. And so we kind of had like a couple classes that were like really tight knit, and then a couple like slightly larger classes. And then moving into the fall semester, we would kind of got integrated into the rest of the 1L classes. So we had, like at least one, I think torts was with the whole 1L class. So you get like the whole experience from very small classes to a more of a mid-size to like the larger classes, and that kind of like allows you to figure out what mode of classes you like. I personally prefer the much smaller ones. We got to parse. Our constitutional law class was just AJDs, and so we got to like talk about specific sentences in the decisions and really sort of pull those apart in a way that in a larger class, you probably can't get quite into the weeds that much, and I like that kind of thing, that kind of close reading. But not everybody does, and then you have the option of kind of like moving on into like larger classes. But now that we are sort of dispersed among the 3L and 2L population in our classes, we still see each other in the hallways all the time. We hang out outside of school. So I would definitely describe the AJDs as kind of like the core, and then the folks that I've met outside of that being the kind of like next sort of circle of network.
Well, thank you once again. And just lastly, how has the opportunity to start your legal career early influenced your professional goals or your job search strategy?
Um, Echoing, well, Senta talked a little bit about big law, and that if you're in the AJD program, you have to be like a little bit more proactive with aligning your schedule to some of the more traditional timelines. For me, what that sort of meant was I did want to get like a little bit more I don't know, how should I say, like sheltered experience when I first get into the workforce. And so I'm going to be doing a year-long clerkship next year with a judge in New Jersey. And a lot of 3-year students also do a clerkship after graduating. I think it works really well, or well, I hope it works really well with the AJD program because it is like a lot of supervision and working one-on-one with the judge. That's what he's told me anyway. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm thinking of it as a kind of like extension of the AJD program into a 3rd year, kind of like working one-on-one with this judge. And then I think that will be like a good sort of like springboard into the rest of my career.
I agree. My professional goals have changed so much, but as they would if I was in the traditional program because of being proactive with networking and with the experiential learning. I've touched about every corner of the school experience as you possibly could with co-curriculars and student orgs and everything, just to see if I could, and I can. Yay. Um, but I also will say that the 2-year program does allow you to stand out as a candidate. At least that's the impression that I've received from employers and judges and other attorneys. They do see that first on your resume and go, how were you able to manage graduating in 2 years instead of three? That's really fascinating. It must take like just kind of a different level of motivation. And they do admire that in the Philadelphia area, at least, that respect Klein and respect the 2-year program. And so I've only found my professional goals to have a positive influence.
Um, all right. Well, thank you all so much for just sharing your thoughtful answers and your experiences as a Klein student. That was very, very helpful, and hopefully, you all in the audience found it insightful. So now we're going to open things up to audience questions. Again, if there's something that you'd like to know more about, whether it's the workload or the application process, life as a student, please feel free to utilize our Q&A box. I will direct some of the questions to our panelists, or our admissions team. Jacqueline and Ina will answer them as they come in. So let us check out the Q&A box. There have been a few questions coming in, and I know some questions have been answered throughout the session. So let's see. All
Yeah,
right.
and I can chime in with a question that came in. I know that you guys have both talked a little bit about the rigorous course load and kind of managing that time, but a couple of questions have come in just so sort of overall time management, potentially with other priorities in your life, for students that have families and are potentially working a little bit. And can either of you speak to that, either from your direct experience or just from classmates, about, kind of how that time management works, both with course load and, external priorities?
Yeah, I mean it's a balancing act for sure. I I think the probably like the biggest challenge with the AJD program is I think it's like jumping in at the beginning. The summer semester is a little bit shorter, so that summer semester is like a little bit condensed, and I think that's like a little intense, and it requires quite a bit of work outside of school. I know, but people find like different ways to manage it. I see the question in the Q&A about families and young children. I don't have any kids, but there are folks in the AJD program in our cohort who have kids. Our friend Mike, his son was born like a year before he started, so he was like a young kid. We have another friend, Tara, and she has like teenage kids. I've seen how other folks sort of like manage the family dynamic. I'm not going to lie to you and say that there's like no stress involved, or that some kind of tough choices might have to be made. But I can tell you that if it's something that you're committed to, and it is manageable, or it can be managed. I will say, like, both of those folks that I know who have kids, they are like really, they're efficient and they're motivated, and they know kind of like what works for them. I think they also know their limits. They know when to stop. That's something that is still a learning process for me. I have a hard time like on the weekends, sort of like closing the book and moving on to not school stuff. So, it depends. I also know some people that have like hard and fast rules. Like, I do not work after 7 o'clock, or I take Sundays to myself. Like, Sunday is my day, and come what may, that's my time. I tend to not be that way. I tend to let kind of schoolwork sort of bleed into, my evenings and weekends, routinely. But that's just kind of like my personality. It's the way I've always done it. I get kind of like into it. It's important to take like not school breaks, but then I also get like some enjoyment too out of, reading weird old cases and stuff. And I hope that if you're interested in law school, you take at least a little bit of enjoyment out of reading that kind of stuff. I'm not going to lie, like sometimes it's frustrated and I don't get to go to the gym as much as I want. And, there are some times when I really would love to go to like this concert, but it's like a night before a final and there's just no way that that's going to happen. So there are sacrifices to be made and decisions to be made, but it is doable. And then one thing, the last thing, I'm talking too long. It was a little bit comforting for me to know that deceleration is an option. So like if you start on the AJD path and you do a semester and you're just like, whoa, like I need a minute, and you want to transition into the 3-year program, that was a possibility. And even though I didn't take that route, it was really comforting for me to know it was an option.
Thank you.
Definitely agree with everything that was said. If I could just add, um, yes, absolutely. It's going to be stressful no matter you're in the AJD program or the traditional program, and everyone has their life. I don't have I don't have any kids, but our cohort members that do have been really successful, and all of this just is to say to reflect on your own limits and your own balancing preferences. Everyone's going to answer this question differently, and I found myself comparing my strategies and my preferences to my peers, and that's just detrimental. I found for me that the best thing I can do is to strategize my recharge time, making it productive rather than maybe like doom scrolling. If I'm telling myself I'm taking a break for an hour, that hour is going to be spent napping or doing whatever works best so that when I do get back into it, I'm clear-headed and I'm ready to go. I am one of those people that also has a lot of personal boundaries, and I do think they're important. So I do have a hard cutoff at 10 p.m. I will not work past then, and I do take some days off. Sorry, Andrew, that totally contradicted what you're saying, but it does speak to the fact that everyone will have their own strategies. And so they also may change when you enter. The summer is definitely the most intense, but once you get past it, it'll feel a little bit easier after then, and it'll be a great time to reflect and be mindful of what's going to work best for you, and it will look completely different to the people sitting next to you, and not to let that distract or just distract you.
Awesome. Thank you both for really responding to that question thoughtfully and transparently. We appreciate that. And also to the audience, just a reminder that we did answer some questions throughout today's session. So if you want to just go back and, catch up on all of the questions that have been answered, there were a few that came in that you might find valuable. And then so just going back, we do have another question. This one is directly for you, Andrew. We want to know, for older students going to law school, are there any unique challenges or benefits to making this career change? And if you could share any insight or advice from your experience.
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of times it helps just to have some, like life experience with things like contracts. Like I've signed like a fair number of contracts before I walked into a contracts class, right? And I like I've had leases and I had a mortgage and like all those things. So when those things come up, it's like a little bit more intuitive and I don't have to, like Google some of that stuff or if I get asked a question about something like that, it does help sometimes. Um, Beyond that, I think again, my advice would go back to just like thinking strategically about the choices that you want to make. You know, some like younger students I think have like a little bit more flexibility with like, oh, maybe I'll explore this area of the law and then I'll go to another one, and try to like figure out by process of elimination like what is best for me. I think in like the AJD program, but then even more so for folks who are like a little bit further along in their career and in their life. I think it's helpful to have a little bit more of a clearer vision about what you want at the end, like what your goals are. Which isn't to say that there's no room for exploring. I'm still like open to like a few different options. I said at the beginning, labor and employment, but I also do have just an interest in like public interest and that kind of thing. I think it's, there's a balance between like not closing off opportunities and, but then also having kind of like focus in mind and be moving toward it, but still being willing to like pivot. I had my heart set on a particular fellowship last summer, and I really thought that that was going to like springboard me into like the world of labor law, but it didn't work out. And so I, pivoted. I found another summer co-op experience, which was excellent, and I loved it. And I was helping people get unemployment benefits, and I was getting them, money from the state of Pennsylvania, and they needed it, and it was great. It was a great fit. So I think like maybe for a career changer or career changers or older students, just having a little bit more of a defined vision of what you want, but still being open to transition as well. And I know that's such a lawyer answer of like a little bit of A and a little bit of B, but it's impossible to speak to everyone's situation, and that's what I've tried to do is have goals in mind but be open to detours.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you all in the audience found that very helpful. Right now, we are going to, start to take our final questions. So if you could please, if you have any questions about, the application process, anything regarding the program, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A box. Again, just mentioning that we did have some answered questions that you can go back and look at. Take a few more questions, see if any more questions come in.
Yeah, and while we're waiting, for any additional questions that might come in, I'll pose one last question to the two of you, that I think, is something that really stands out for when students come for a tour or for a visit, where they kind of speak a little bit about our community, and didn't know if you wanted to touch a little bit upon, I know that you've talked about it within the 2-year program, but just generally overall, what kind of the school community is like here, because I think that that's really an important part of, what we value.
I found that this community has been really inclusive and accessible, both with students and with faculty and professors. For faculty and professors, they all really have this open door policy, and they really do abide by that. I've found myself walking into professors' offices with probably the most outrageous questions, and they've always been really happy to chat and connect. And they've also been really happy to learn a little bit about your interests and connect you. I Dean Scholared over the summer. It's like TAing for a torts class for a professor. And based on my performance with that, this professor was able to connect me with the employer of my summer co-op, who is also connecting me to other post-grad opportunities. And so professors have really taken an active role in uplifting and empowering their students. And then as far as the student community goes, it's really diverse and it's really inclusive that way. I found that with student organizations in particular, we have affinity groups that represent just about every identity, and other student organizations that represent all kinds of areas of interest if you want to explore, one sector of law. And I found that the general body meetings and the events and the networking opportunities that are correlated with these organizations have always been really welcoming and accessible and mindful of everyone's schedule and plates and bandwidth for that time of the semester. I know I'm a little bit biased because as student body president, I feel like I have to say these things. But no, I chose to be in this role to reflect those values and to lead with those values, because I really do find them critical to the law school experience as a whole. It's a very competitive environment typically, but I found that that kind of goes in the back of the brain when everyone here has been so welcoming and helpful and like peer first.
Yeah. You hear these like horror stories about law school about like people like checking books out of the library and like hiding them from their classmates. And I'm laughing because like I don't know, I've never experienced anything like that here. I think like overall like it's super supportive. people ask each other for notes all the time. Like I just like sat next to like a random person on in a class that I didn't know anyone, and so I was just like sitting next to someone, and they were absent the next day, and then the day after that, they asked me if I would share my notes. I'm like, of course I'm going to share my notes with you. Like, here you go, whatever you need. People form study groups, and everybody just supports each other. Like, are you going to get along with like every single other student? Like, no, probably not. Like, it's, we're human, and, we have preferences, and, you develop like the group of people that are, it's kind of like your core people. Yeah, I think that it's like overall like very supportive. I've never met a student who was like overly competitive to the point. I mean, people definitely want to succeed, like they want to do well. And the classes are graded on a curve, so like in a certain way you're like graded against your classmates, and so in that way, like this system is sort of like set up for students to compete with each other. But that has never like gotten like in the way of an interpersonal relationship in my experience. And there's like especially in the AJD class, like half the students are vying for like first. Like we get ranked at the end of the semester, and it's at the end, like, yeah, somebody comes out on top and they're ranked number one. But in my experience, number two, three, four, five, whatever, we don't really care. We're just like, hey, good job, like you really earned it, and best of luck. So, no, yeah, I don't think it's like super competitive. Every once in a while, you'll be like, oh, I'd really like to beat so and so on this exam, but like, it's nothing more than that. It never gets in the way of a relationship, in my
Well,
experience.
thank you. Those are really great answers, and it's really important to find your tribe, and that kind of supportive community, which students here have ample opportunity to do so. So thank you for sharing that. And so at this time, we're going to close the Q&A here. Thank you all again for joining us today, and a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. I will share our um, contact us. You can use our email address, lawadmissions@drexel.edu, to share any other questions or concerns you may have had about maybe the application process, any questions about our program, the 2-year, 3-year summer start, or the 3-year traditional program, and we'd be happy to follow up with you there. Again, if you'd like to connect with us in person, we do have a Visit Us page where you can tour the school, come in for a class visit, or just do another virtual information session with one of our law student ambassadors. And yeah, so we hope this session has helped you kind of envision what it's like to be a part of the Drexel Kline community. And we do look forward to hopefully reviewing your applications or receiving your applications very soon. So thank you all again for spending your afternoon with us, and we wish you the best as you take the next steps in your journey to law school ahead. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everyone. You all asked really great questions, so looking forward to connecting again. Have a great rest of your day.